Is she our sister? The twins asked, unable to hide their shock. The millionaire was paralyzed when he looked at the dirty girl, asleep on the floor of the gas station. She was identical to his daughters. That absurd resemblance couldn't be a coincidence. It was the beginning of a cruel truth that had been hidden for years. And from that moment on, his life began to fall apart, revealing secrets capable of destroying his own family. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Matthew Hartwell's life followed a well-established rhythm. At 42, the self-made tech mogul had built Hartwell Innovations into a billion-dollar empire while raising his twin daughters as a single father. Their mother, Sophia, had passed away shortly after childbirth due to unexpected complications, leaving Matthew to navigate parenthood alone. Today was no different from any other Tuesday. Matthew had picked up 12-year-old Emma and Olivia from their private school in Greenwich, Connecticut, and they were heading to their lakeside estate. The twins sat in the back of his Range Rover, engrossed in their tablets, barely noticing, when Matthew pulled into a roadside gas station. "I'll be right back, girls," he said, stepping out of the car. The late September air carried the first hint of autumn. "Need anything from inside?" "I'm good, Dad," Emma replied without looking up. Olivia shook her head, her blonde hair identical to her sister's, catching the afternoon sunlight. Matthew smiled at them before heading into the convenience store. His daughters were his world, the center of everything he did. After losing Sophia, he had thrown himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he applied to his business ventures. The twins wanted for nothing, attended the best schools, and had every opportunity life could offer. Inside the store, Matthew grabbed a coffee and paid at the counter. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye through the window. A small figure huddled near the air pump station outside. At first, he thought nothing of it, but as he stepped outside, something made him pause. The girl couldn't have been more than 12, with dirty blonde hair and tattered clothing. She appeared to be alone, sitting on the ground with her knees pulled to her chest. Matthew glanced around, looking for an adult who might be responsible for her. Finding none, he approached slowly. "Hey there," he said gently. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" The girl looked up, and Matthew felt the world stop spinning. Her face, it was Emma's face. It was Olivia's face. The same heart-shaped features, the same small nose with a light dusting of freckles, the same blue-green eyes. Not similar, but identical in every way. Matthew's coffee slipped from his grasp, splashing across the concrete. "Sorry," he mumbled, struggling to maintain his composure. You look exactly like..." He stopped, unsure how to continue. The girl regarded him warily. "I'm waiting for Mrs. Wilson. She's inside paying." "Mrs. Wilson?" Matthew asked, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "The social worker," the girl explained. "Gran passed away last week. I'm going to a temporary home until they figure things out." Matthew felt his chest tighten. "What's your name?" "Lily," she replied. "Lily Reynolds." "Lily," he repeated, the name feeling significant in ways he couldn't yet understand. "I'm Matthew Hartwell." Something flickered across Lily's face. Recognition, perhaps, though Matthew was certain they'd never met. "How old are you, Lily?" 12, she answered. 13 in December. December, the same birth month as Emma and Olivia. "Dad?" Olivia's voice called from the car. "What's taking so long?" Matthew turned to see both his daughters approaching, curiosity evident on their faces. The moment they spotted Lily, they froze, mirroring his own reaction minutes earlier. "Dad?" Emma whispered. "Who is she?" Lily stood up, her eyes widening. As she took in the two girls who shared her face, the three children stared at each other in stunned silence, an impossible mirror image repeated 3 times. "Mr. Hartwell," a woman's voice broke the moment. "Can I help you?" A middle-aged woman in a sensible suit approached, looking between Matthew and Lily with concern. "Are you Mrs. Wilson?" Matthew asked, his voice strained. "Yes, I am. Is there a problem?" Matthew struggled to find the words. I think "We need to talk. About Lily." Mrs. Wilson frowned. "Do you know Lily?" "No," Matthew admitted, "but I think I should." He gestured toward his daughters. "These are my twins, Emma and Olivia." Mrs. Wilson's professional demeanor faltered as she took in the three identical faces. "Oh my goodness. My daughters were born at Greenwich Memorial Hospital," Matthew continued, the words tumbling out. "December 15th, 12 years ago." Lily's eyes widened. "That's my birthday, and I was born there too." Matthew felt lightheaded. "Mrs. Wilson, I'd like to speak with your supervisor. There's something very wrong here." The social worker nodded slowly, clearly stunned. "Yes, I think that would be wise." Lily looked between the twins and Matthew. "Gran always said my father would have loved me if he knew I existed," she whispered. "She said someone took me away before he could know." The words hit Matthew like a physical blow. Memories flooded back, the chaotic night of the twins' birth, Sophia's sudden decline afterward, the confusion and grief that followed. He'd been told they had two beautiful daughters, never three. "Mrs. Wilson," Matthew said, his voice steadier now, determination replacing shock. "I'm not letting Lily go to a temporary home. Not when there's a possibility, a strong possibility, that she belongs with us." "Mr. Hartwell, there are procedures." "I understand," he interrupted, "and I'll follow them all, DNA tests, court hearings, whatever it takes. But in the meantime, I'm not letting her out of my sight." Emma stepped forward, reaching for Lily's hand. "You look just like us." Olivia joined them. "It's like looking in a mirror." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I never knew I had sisters. I need to make some calls," Mrs. Wilson said, reaching for her phone. "This is unprecedented." Matthew watched his daughters, all three of them, standing together, an incomplete puzzle finally finding its missing piece. A surge of protective fury washed over him. Someone had taken his child. Someone had stolen 12 years he could never get back. "We'll sort this out," he promised, addressing all three girls. "We're going to figure out exactly what happened." As Mrs. Wilson stepped away to make her calls, Matthew knelt before Lily. "I don't know yet if I'm your father, though everything suggests I am. But I promise you this, I will find the truth. And if you are mine, no one will ever separate us again." Lily nodded, a tentative hope dawning in eyes that were so familiar. Behind them, Emma and Olivia watched with matching expressions of wonder and confusion. Their perfectly ordered world had just been upended, but neither seemed afraid, only curious and somehow protective of this girl who wore their face. In the span of 15 minutes at a routine gas station stop, Matthew Hartwell's life had transformed. The carefully constructed rhythm of his days had been shattered, replaced by questions that demanded answers and a fierce determination to uncover a truth that someone had gone to great lengths to hide. As they stood in the fading afternoon light, four strangers who might be family, Matthew knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. And strangely, despite the shock and anger churning inside him, he felt more alive than he had in years. "Let's go home," he said finally. "All of us." The Hartwell estate sprawled across 5 acres of prime Connecticut real estate, its modern, glass and stone architecture, a testament to Matthew's success. As they pulled through the security gates, Lily pressed her face against the car window, eyes wide with wonder. "You live here," she whispered. Emma, who had insisted on sitting beside Lily in the back seat, nodded casually. "It's home." After considerable negotiation, Mrs. Wilson had agreed to let Lily stay with the Hartwells temporarily, under emergency custodial provisions. The situation was unprecedented enough that her supervisor had authorized the arrangement, pending immediate genetic testing and a court hearing scheduled for the following week. Matthew led them into the house, hyper-aware of how Lily's worn sneakers and faded jeans contrasted with the polished marble floors and designer furnishings. According to Mrs. Wilson, Lily had been raised by her grandmother, Margaret Reynolds, in a modest apartment in New Haven. Margaret had passed away from heart failure the previous week, leaving Lily with no known relatives. No known relatives until now, Matthew thought. "Are you hungry?" he asked, watching Lily take in her surroundings with cautious eyes. She nodded, though her attention was clearly elsewhere. The twins, normally reserved with strangers, hovered near her like moths drawn to a flame, fascinated by this mirror image of themselves. While Mrs. Lawson, the housekeeper, prepared dinner, Matthew made a series of urgent phone calls. The first was to his attorney, Jackson Pierce. "Jack, I need you at the house now, and bring Dr. Montrose. We need DNA testing done tonight." His second call was to his sister, Diana, the only person he trusted implicitly outside of his legal team. "Something's happened," he told her, voice low so the girls wouldn't hear. "Something impossible. I need you here." Within an hour, the Hartwell home had transformed into a makeshift command center. Dr. Montrose, the family's private physician, arrived with equipment to collect DNA samples. Diana arrived moments later, stopping dead in her tracks when she saw the three identical girls sitting at the kitchen island. "My God," she breathed. "Matt, what is this?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," he replied, leading her into his study where Jack Pierce was already reviewing documents. Diana was 5 years older than Matthew, with the same dark hair and sharp features. Unlike her brother, who had built his fortune in tech, Diana was a renowned child psychologist. Her expertise would be invaluable in the days ahead. "The physical resemblance is undeniable," Jack stated, glancing through the door at the girls. "But we need scientific confirmation before proceeding with any legal action." Matthew paced the room. "I don't need a DNA test to know what I'm seeing, Jack. Someone took my child. Someone deliberately separated her from us and falsified records to cover it up." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Diana cautioned, "though I admit the resemblance is startling." Dr. Montrose entered the study, closing the door behind her. "I've collected the samples. I'll rush them to the lab tonight. We should have preliminary results by morning, definitive ones within 48 hours. "What are the girls doing?" Matthew asked. "They're getting along remarkably well," Dr. Montrose replied with a small smile. "They've discovered they all play violin, though Lily says she had to stop lessons when her grandmother became ill." The casual observation hit Matthew like a physical blow. Violin. Another connection. Another piece of evidence. Both Emma and Olivia had shown natural talent for the instrument from an early age, a gift they'd inherited from Sophia. "We need to look at the hospital records," he said suddenly. "Birth certificates, delivery room records, everything from that night." Jack nodded. "I've already requested them. But Matthew, if someone deliberately altered records 12 years ago, they may have covered their tracks thoroughly." "Not thoroughly." "It's enough," Matthew replied. "They made one critical mistake. They let Lily live." Diana shot him a warning look. "Matthew, careful. Whatever happened, Lily is a child who's just lost her grandmother, her only known family. She needs stability and support, not to be at the center of an investigation." Matthew ran a hand through his hair, forcing himself to calm down. "You're right, the girls come first, all three of them." When they returned to the kitchen, they found an extraordinary scene. The three girls sat close together, pointing out similarities and differences in their appearances and mannerisms. Despite their identical features, their personalities shone through distinctly. Emma, always the analytical one, was making a list of shared traits. Olivia, more empathetic, had her arm around Lily's shoulders. And Lily. Lily seemed to be blossoming before their eyes, her initial wariness giving way to cautious happiness. "Lily plays chess too, Dad," Emma announced. "And she's allergic to strawberries, just like us. And she hates math but loves history," Olivia added. "Just like me." Matthew felt his throat tighten. These weren't coincidences. This was nature asserting itself, despite nurture's attempt to separate what belonged together. That night, Matthew prepared a guest room for Lily, though the twins begged to have a sleepover in their shared recreational space. "Please, Dad," Olivia pleaded. "We've got 12 years to catch up on." Matthew relented, knowing sleep would likely elude all of them anyway. Before the girls disappeared upstairs, he knelt before Lily. "I know this is overwhelming," he said gently. "If you need anything at all, you just have to ask." Lily nodded, her eyes so like his daughter's, studying his face intently. "My gran told me my mother passed when I was born," she said softly. She said my father never knew about me because someone took me away before he could see me. Was that you? The directness of her question caught Matthew off guard. I don't know yet, Lily, but I promise we're going to find out the truth. After the girls went upstairs, Matthew retreated to his study with Diana and Jack. Together they began piecing together what little they knew. Greenwich Memorial, December 15th, 12 years ago, Jack recited, making notes. Sophia experienced complications during delivery and was rushed into emergency surgery afterward. The birth was chaotic, Matthew recalled, the memories still painful. The girls came early. There were complications. I wasn't allowed in the delivery room. Who handled the administrative details afterward? Diana asked. With Sophia in critical condition and you focused on her and the babies. Matthew froze. Edward, he said, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. Edward Hartwell, my cousin. He was hospital administrator at Greenwich Memorial at the time. Jack and Diana exchanged glances. Edward has always resented you, Diana said carefully, even before the company went public and you became wealthy. He's also been living very comfortably for someone on a hospital administrator's salary, Jack added. I've noticed his lifestyle at the few family gatherings I've attended with you. Matthew's phone rang, interrupting the discussion. It was Dr. Montrose. I called in some favors, she said without preamble. The lab ran a preliminary comparison using rapid PCR. Matthew, the genetic markers are consistent across all three girls. They appear to be identical triplets, not just lookalikes. We'll need the full panel for court, but scientifically speaking, there's no question. Matthew thanked her and hung up, turning to the others. It's confirmed. They're triplets. The revelation hung in the air, momentous yet somehow unsurprising given what they'd all observed. We need to access the hospital records, Jack stated, already reaching for his phone. And we need to look into Edward's finances for the past 12 years. Matthew nodded, a cold determination settling over him. I want every detail of Margaret Reynolds' life investigated too. How she came to have Lily, what she was told, who gave her the child. I'll start making calls, Jack promised. But Matthew, this will take time. And if what we suspect is true, whoever did this won't give up their secrets easily. They don't have a choice, Matthew replied, his voice steel, because I'm not giving up my daughter again. Upstairs, the sound of laughter drifted down the hallway. Three voices melodically similar, yet each with its own distinct tone blending together as if they'd never been apart. In that moment, Matthew made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, no matter how ugly. He would find justice, for Lily, for the twins, for Sophia. And when he discovered who had torn his family apart, they would pay dearly for every moment lost, every memory stolen. But first, he would ensure that Lily knew she was home, that after 12 years in the wilderness, she had finally found where she belonged. The morning sun streamed through the east-facing windows of Matthew's home office as he reviewed the preliminary findings Jack had emailed. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night poring over old photographs and documents from the time of the twins' birth. Now, with a fresh cup of coffee in hand, he studied the report with growing anger. The doorbell rang, followed by Mrs. Lawson announcing Jack's arrival. The attorney entered, looking as if he too had been up all night. The DNA results are official, Jack said without preamble, placing a folder on Matthew's desk. 99.9% probability that all three girls are identical triplets, and 99.9% probability that you're their father. Matthew nodded, having expected nothing less. What about the hospital records? That's where things get interesting. Jack pulled out a tablet and brought up a series of documents. I had my team pull everything from Greenwich Memorial's archives. Most of the records appear normal at first glance, but when we cross-referenced them with state birth registrations, we found discrepancies. He pointed to a form on the screen. This is the initial birth record, filed at 2:17 a.m. on December 15th. It clearly states triplets, all female, live birth. But this, he swiped to another document, is the official record that was submitted to the state. Notice the difference? Matthew leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Twins. It says twins. Exactly. Someone altered the record between the delivery room and the final filing. And guess who had administrative access to make such changes? Edward, Matthew said, the name coming out as a growl. There's more, Jack continued. We pulled financial records for your family trust, the one your father established for his grandchildren. Each child was to receive an equal share upon reaching adulthood. Matthew saw where this was headed. The money meant for the third child was diverted, Jack confirmed. A third of the trust's assets were gradually siphoned off over the past 12 years through a series of complex transactions. The paper trail leads to an offshore account in the Caymans registered to a shell company. Can you trace the beneficial owner? Jack's expression was grim. We're working on it, but these structures are designed to obscure ownership. However, there's a connection to a property purchase in Aspen 3 years ago, a luxury chalet, bought through another shell company, but with Edward listed as the property manager. Matthew stood abruptly, rage building inside him. He stole my child, Jack. My own cousin took my daughter and then stole her inheritance. We need more evidence before making accusations, Jack cautioned. But yes, it looks that way. The question is, who helped him? Edward couldn't have done this alone. Someone had to physically take the baby and place her with Margaret Reynolds. Matthew paced the room, mind racing. What have you found about Margaret? She was a nurse at Greenwich Memorial until about 14 years ago. She retired shortly, before your daughters were born, then suddenly moved to New Haven with an infant she claimed was her granddaughter. She was in on it? Matthew asked, disbelieving. I don't think so, Jack replied, based on preliminary interviews with her. Neighbors and Lily's account, Margaret genuinely believed she was caring for her deceased daughter's child. According to the story she told people, her daughter passed away in childbirth and the father didn't want the baby. Matthew froze. Wait, did Margaret even have a daughter? Jack grimaced. That's where it gets more disturbing. She did, Amanda. Reynolds, who worked as a surgical nurse at Greenwich Memorial, but Amanda didn't pass away in childbirth. She was in a fatal car accident nearly 4 months before your daughters were born. The implications struck Matthew like a physical blow. So they used a dead woman's identity to create a backstory for Lily. It appears so, and they chose Margaret because she had recently lost her daughter and was vulnerable. According to her neighbors, she was devastated after Amanda's passing. Then suddenly she has a grandchild to care for, a reason to live. Matthew sank back into his chair, trying to process the calculated cruelty of the scheme. They exploited a grieving mother's pain to hide their crime. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Diana entered, looking troubled. The girls are having breakfast, she said. But we need to talk about Lily. She's been having nightmares. Matthew's protective instincts flared. What kind of nightmares? About her grandmother, Diana explained, but also about a man who used to visit them. Someone she says made her grandmother nervous. She couldn't remember his name, just that. He would bring money and check on them. She said her grandmother would always send her to her room when he came. Matthew and Jack exchanged glances. Edward, Matthew said. It has to be. He was monitoring them, making sure his secret stayed. Buried. There's more, Diana continued. Lily mentioned that this man became angry during his last visit, about 2 months ago. He and her grandmother argued about money. She overheard him saying something had been used up, earlier than planned. Jack's expression darkened. The trust fund. If he's been systematically draining it, he might have accelerated the timeline recently. But why? Matthew asked. Why now, after 12 years? I don't know, Jack admitted. But I'm having my team look into Edward's recent financial activities. If he's in trouble, he might have gotten desperate. The sound of laughter drifted in from the kitchen, momentarily lightening the mood. Despite the shocking circumstances, the 3 girls had formed an instant bond. Lily, initially quiet and reserved, was already adopting some of her sister's mannerisms and confidence. What's our next step? Matthew asked. I've filed emergency motions for temporary custody, Jack replied. The hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given the DNA evidence and the circumstances, I don't anticipate any issues. For permanent custody, we'll need to build a case proving the fraud. And what about Edward? Matthew's voice hardened. How do we prove what he did? We need access to his financial records and communication history. I've engaged a forensic, accountant and private investigator. But Matthew, Jack added cautiously, we need to proceed carefully. If Edward realizes we're onto him, he might destroy evidence or worse. I don't care about the money, Matthew stated firmly. I just want justice for Lily and to make sure Edward can never hurt anyone else. Diana laid a hand on her brother's shoulder. The best justice for Lily is to give her the stable family life she deserves. Focus on that first. Matthew nodded, knowing his sister was right. The legal battle ahead would be complex and potentially ugly, but his priority had to be helping Lily adjust to her new reality. After Jack left, Matthew joined the girls in the kitchen. The scene before him made his heart ache with both joy and regret for what could have been. Emma was showing Lily how to make her signature chocolate chip pancakes, while Olivia set the table. They moved around each other with an easy familiarity that belied their brief acquaintance. "Dad," Olivia called when she spotted him. "Come try Lily's pancakes, they're amazing." Matthew sat at the island counter accepting a plate. "You like cooking?" he asked Lily. She nodded shyly. "Gran taught me we couldn't afford to eat out much." The simple statement highlighted the vast difference between Lily's upbringing and the privileged life his other daughters had known. While Emma and Olivia had vacationed in Europe and attended elite private schools, Lily had been helping her grandmother make ends meet in a modest apartment. "I was thinking," Matthew said carefully, "we should go shopping today. Get you some new clothes, anything else you might need." Lily's eyes widened. "I don't need anything fancy." "It's not about fancy," he assured her. "It's about having what's yours, things you should have had all along." As the day progressed, Matthew observed the subtle ways Lily differed from her sisters, despite their identical appearance. Where Emma was boldly confident and Olivia dreamily artistic, Lily possessed a quiet resilience and practicality that spoke to her different upbringing. Yet beneath these differences lay the same inherent traits: the quick intelligence, the musical ear, the wry sense of humor that had always characterized his daughters. That evening, as the girls watched a movie in the media room, Matthew sat in his study reviewing Margaret Reynolds' financial records that Jack had sent over. What he found confirmed their suspicions. For 12 years, Margaret had received monthly payments from a numbered account, modest sums that supplemented her pension but wouldn't raise suspicion. The payments had stopped abruptly 2 months ago, coinciding with the argument Lily had overheard. His phone rang. Diana, who had left earlier to see patients. "Matt, turn on Channel 8 News now." Frowning, Matthew grabbed the remote and switched on the television in his study. The news anchor's voice filled the room. Allegations of patient neglect at New Horizons Children's Center in Bridgeport. The facility, which houses over 60 displaced children, has come under scrutiny after anonymous whistleblowers provided evidence of substandard conditions and possible financial impropriety. The center's director, Calvin Morris, has denied all accusations. The screen showed footage of a bleak institutional building, then cut to a man in an expensive suit defending himself to reporters. Behind him, partially obscured but unmistakable, stood Edward Hartwell. Matthew froze the image. What is Edward doing at a children's home in Bridgeport? That's what I wondered, Diana replied. So I made some calls. Edward sits on the board of New Horizons, has for years. It's supposedly part of his charitable work. Charitable? Matthew scoffed. Edward doesn't have a charitable bone in his body. Exactly. So I dug deeper. New Horizons receives substantial state funding based on the number of children in their care. If someone wanted to embezzle money, the pieces clicked together in Matthew's mind. A children's home would provide the perfect cover. Inflate numbers, cut corners on care, pocket the difference. And if you needed to place a child somewhere, temporarily, without too many questions, Matthew felt sick. You think Lily might not have been the only child he displaced? I don't know, Diana admitted, but I think we should find out. As Matthew hung up, a new determination filled him. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. If Edward was involved in wider exploitation of vulnerable children, the stakes had just gotten much higher. He glanced toward the media room, where his daughter's laughter echoed. Lily was safe now, but how many other children might not be? How many others had been used as pawns in Edward's schemes? Matthew reached for his phone to call Jack. The investigation had just expanded beyond his family's tragedy, and whatever it took, however long it required, Matthew would ensure that every child affected by Edward's greed would find justice and a home where they truly belonged. The following morning, Matthew sat across from Samantha Reeves, a former employee of New Horizons Children's Center, who had agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in downtown Greenwich. Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee, eyes darting nervously to the door whenever it opened. "I appreciate you meeting with me, Ms. Reeves," Matthew said. "I understand you're taking a risk." Samantha nodded, her expression grim. "They made us sign non-disclosure agreements, but after what I saw there, some things matter more than legal paperwork." "Can you tell me about the conditions at New Horizons?" "On paper, it looks impressive," she explained. "They showcase renovated areas for visitors and inspectors, but the children's actual living spaces are overcrowded and understaffed. Basic necessities, proper nutrition, educational materials, even adequate clothing, are constantly in short supply despite the generous funding they receive." Matthew leaned forward. "And the board? How involved are they in daily operations?" "Most board members are figureheads who show up for fundraisers. But Dr. Hartwell, your cousin, he's different. He visits regularly, always with Director Morris. They spend hours in the administrative offices reviewing paperwork no one else is allowed to see." "When did you first notice problems?" Samantha's eyes hardened. "About 3 years ago, I was working late and overheard them discussing how to process new arrivals more efficiently. They weren't talking about helping children adjust. They were discussing documentation that would maximize state funding while minimizing expenditures." She pulled out her phone, showing Matthew photos she'd secretly taken of children's living quarters, cramped rooms with inadequate bedding, bathrooms with broken fixtures, a dining hall serving meager portions. "The final straw came when I discovered discrepancies in the resident count," she continued. "Official records showed 87 children, but I could only account for 62. When I raised concerns, Director Morris accused me of miscounting and restricted my access to certain areas of the facility. Do you think these missing children never existed? That they were fabricated for funding purposes?" Samantha hesitated. "Some, perhaps, but others. I believe they existed. There were 2 siblings who arrived last year, Jamie and Tyler Anderson, ages 8 and 10, sweet kids who'd lost their parents in a house fire. They were there for about 3 months, then suddenly disappeared. When I asked about them, I was told they'd been placed with relatives. But their files vanished too, as if they'd never been there." Matthew felt a chill run through him. "And you suspect foul play?" "I don't know what happened to them," she admitted, "but something felt wrong. Those kids had no other family. That's why they were at New Horizons in the first place." Matthew drove home. His mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. Was Edward using the Children's Center as more than just an embezzlement scheme? Could he be involved in something even more sinister? He called Jack from the car. "I need you to find everything you can about 2 children, Jamie and Tyler Anderson. They were at New Horizons approximately a year ago before vanishing." "I'm on it," Jack replied. "Meanwhile, I've got news about Edward's finances. He's been making large cash withdrawals over the past 6 weeks, nearly $200,000 total, and he's liquidated several investment accounts." "He's preparing to run," Matthew realized. "Looks that way. There's more. I finally traced the beneficial ownership of that shell company in the Caymans. It belongs to a trust controlled by Edward and Calvin Morris jointly." "The New Horizons director? They're partners in this?" "Appears so. The trust has received millions over the past decade, including the diverted funds from your family trust." When Matthew arrived home, he found Diana in the kitchen with the girls, supervising a baking project that had left flour scattered across every surface. Despite the serious matters weighing on his mind, he couldn't help smiling at the scene. "Dad," Emma called, "we're making Gran's special cookies." It took Matthew a moment to realize she meant Margaret Reynolds' recipe. In just a few days, the girls had seamlessly incorporated Lily's past into their shared narrative. "They're her famous snickerdoodles," Lily explained, a dusting of flour on her cheek. "She always said they could fix anything." After the cookies were in the oven, Matthew pulled Diana aside to share what he'd learned. "This is bigger than we thought," he concluded. "Edward and Morris have been systematically defrauding the state while neglecting vulnerable children. But these missing kids, I can't shake the feeling there's more to it." Diana's expression grew troubled. "I've been reviewing New Horizons' public records. They receive special funding for children with medical needs. If they're claiming to care for children who don't exist or aren't actually there. They're not just stealing money," Matthew finished. "They're potentially endangering lives." The doorbell interrupted their conversation. Mrs. Lawson appeared moments later. "Mr. Hartwell, there's a couple here to see you. They say it's about New Horizons." In the foyer stood a middle-aged couple, their expressions a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm Robert Thompson, and this is my wife, Susan. We heard you've been asking questions about New Horizons." Matthew invited them into his study, away from the girls. Once seated, Robert explained their presence. "We're foster parents. 6 months ago, we were in the process of adopting 2 siblings from New Horizons, Jamie and Tyler Anderson." Matthew exchanged a glance with Diana. "I've heard those names. What happened?" "Everything was proceeding normally," Susan continued, her voice tight with emotion. "We'd had the boys for weekend visits. Their room was ready. The final paperwork was being processed. Then suddenly, Director Morris called to say they'd been placed with blood relatives who had unexpectedly come forward. We knew something was wrong," Robert added. "The boys had told us repeatedly they had no other family. When we pushed for details, Morris became hostile and threatened to report us for harassment. We tried contacting state agencies," Susan said, "but without access to the boys' files, we couldn't prove anything. We've been searching for them ever since." Matthew's protective instincts flared. "Do you have photos of the boys?" Susan pulled out her phone, showing Matthew pictures of 2 smiling boys with matching dimples and sandy hair. "This was at our home during their last weekend visit. With your permission, I'd like my attorney to contact you," Matthew said. "We're building a case against New Horizons leadership, and your testimony could be crucial." After the Thompsons left, Matthew called Jack again. "I need you to widen the investigation. Look for any children who mysteriously disappeared from New Horizons after being there for a short time, and get me everything you can on their medical funding programs." That evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Matthew sat in his study, reviewing the growing pile of evidence against Edward and New Horizons. The picture emerging was disturbing, a systematic fraud operation that exploited the most vulnerable children for profit. But the question of the missing children still haunted him. His phone rang, an unknown number. "Mr. Hartwell." A female voice, tentative and frightened. "My name is Vanessa Clark. I work in the accounting department at New Horizons. I heard you've been asking questions." Matthew sat up straighter. "Yes, I have. Do you have information?" "I can't talk long," she whispered. "But you need to look into the relationship between New Horizons and Beacon Medical Research. They have some kind of arrangement involving certain children. Special cases, they call them." "What kind of arrangement?" "I don't know details. Just that large payments come from Beacon quarterly, labeled as program grants. But these funds never appear in our public financial statements." A cold feeling settled in Matthew's stomach. "Miss Clark, how many children are involved in this program?" "It varies. Currently there are 5, including the Anderson siblings." Her voice dropped even lower. "Dr. Hartwell personally oversees their files. The children are kept in the East Wing, which regular staff can't access." The line went dead before Matthew could ask more questions. He immediately called Jack, relaying the new information. "Find out everything about Beacon Medical Research, what they do, who runs it, and what connection they have to Edward. The next morning, Matthew received Jack's preliminary report on Beacon. The company specialized in experimental treatments for rare genetic disorders with a focus on pediatric cases. Their CEO, Dr. Victor Rees, had attended medical school with Edward. They're using these children for unauthorized medical research, Matthew realized with horror. That's why they target kids without families, no one to ask questions. Diana, who had stayed overnight to help with the girls, looked equally disturbed. If that's true, those children could be in danger. Medical research is strictly regulated for good reason. We need to get them out, Matthew stated firmly. Today. Matthew, we can't just storm in there. That could put the children at greater risk. Then what do you suggest? Diana considered. We need leverage, something that forces them to cooperate without alerting them to our full investigation. Matthew thought for a moment, then smiled grimly. I think I know just the thing. 3. Hours later, Matthew walked into Edward's office at Greenwich Memorial Hospital unannounced. His cousin looked up in surprise, then quickly masked it with a thin smile. Matthew, this is unexpected. I thought it was time we caught up, Matthew replied, taking a seat without invitation. I've been meaning to discuss your role at New Horizons. Edward's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. My charitable work? I wasn't aware you had an interest in child welfare. Oh, I've developed quite a passion for it recently. Matthew's tone remained conversational. In fact, I'm considering a substantial donation to New Horizons, but first I'd like a tour, specifically of the East Wing. The color drained from Edward's face. The East Wing is under renovation, not suitable for visitors. Interesting, because I heard it houses some very special residents, children involved in a partnership with Beacon Medical Research. Edward's composure slipped further. Where did you hear? I'm prepared to offer New Horizons $5 million, Matthew interrupted. Today, but only after I see everything, including the Anderson siblings. This is highly irregular, Edward stammered. Director Morris handles all donations. Then call him, Matthew suggested. Tell him we'll be there in an hour, unless there's something you don't want me to see. Edward's eyes narrowed, calculation replacing shock. $5 million is generous, but why the sudden interest? Matthew leaned forward. Let's just say I've developed a particular concern for children separated from their families. Now, shall we schedule that tour, or should I take my donation elsewhere? Perhaps to the state oversight board, along with some interesting financial documentation I've acquired. The threat hung in the air between them. Finally, Edward reached for his phone. I'll call Director Morris. 1 hour. As Matthew left the office, he texted Jack. Plan in motion, have team ready. Then he called Diana. Stay with the girls. Don't let them out of your sight until you hear from me. Whatever happened next, Matthew was determined that no more children would suffer because of Edward's greed. And somewhere in that East Wing, 2 siblings were waiting to be found, just as Lily had been waiting all these years, unknown but never truly forgotten. New Horizons. Children's Center loomed against the afternoon sky, its brick facade and manicured front lawn presenting a deceptively welcoming appearance. Matthew parked his car in the visitor's lot, where Jack Pierce was waiting with Melissa Torres, a state child welfare investigator who had agreed to accompany them after reviewing the evidence Jack had compiled. Remember, Jack cautioned as they approached the entrance, we're here on the pretense of a donation tour. Our priority is to confirm the children's presence and condition without alerting Edward and Morris to the full scope of our investigation. I've got a court order authorizing inspection of all facilities if they resist, Torres added, patting her briefcase. But it would be better if we don't have to use it. Element of surprise is crucial here. Inside, they were greeted by Calvin Morris, a heavy-set man with an artificial smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. Edward stood beside him, visibly tense despite his attempt at casual composure. Matthew, welcome to New Horizons, Morris began, extending his hand. Edward tells me you're interested in supporting our work here. Very interested, Matthew confirmed, shaking the man's hand firmly. "I'd like to see everything you do here. All your programs, all your facilities." Morris's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, though some areas are under renovation, as I'm sure Edward mentioned." "I'd still like to see them," Matthew insisted. "My donation would help complete those renovations, after all." Morris exchanged a glance with Edward before nodding reluctantly. "As you wish. Let's begin with our main residential areas." The tour proceeded through carefully presented spaces, classrooms with new supplies, a cafeteria that was suspiciously spotless, and dormitory rooms that appeared comfortable but showed signs of hasty preparation. Throughout, Matthew noted the discrepancies between what they were shown and what Samantha Reeves had documented. Children they encountered seemed cautious, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes. "And now," Matthew said as they completed the main tour, "I'd like to see the East Wing." Morris's smile disappeared entirely. "As I mentioned, that area is under construction." "Actually," Torres interjected, speaking for the first time, "as a state inspector, I'm authorized to view all areas of the facility, regardless of their condition." She produced her identification. "Melissa Torres, Department of Children and Families." Edward's face hardened. "You didn't mention you were bringing a state inspector, Matthew." "Didn't I?" Matthew replied innocently. "Ms. Torres happened to be interested in my donation plans." "Now the East Wing?" Trapped, Morris led them through a locked door that connected to a separate section of the building. The difference was immediately apparent. The hallway was institutional and stark, with none of the colorful decorations that adorned the main facility. "This area houses our medical program," Morris explained stiffly. "Children with special healthcare needs receive specialized attention here." "From Beacon Medical Research staff?" Matthew asked pointedly. Morris stopped walking. "Our partnership with Beacon allows these children access to cutting-edge treatments they couldn't receive elsewhere." "I'd like to see these treatments," Matthew pressed. "The medical staff isn't here today," Edward cut in quickly. "Perhaps we could schedule another visit when—" "The children are still here, though?" Torres asked, making notes. "I'd like to see their living conditions and review their files." Morris's jaw clenched. "That would require parental consent." "Interesting," Torres replied, "because according to our records, several children here, including Jamie and Tyler Anderson, have no legal guardians except New Horizons itself, which means you, as director, can provide that consent. Or I can use this." She produced the court order from her briefcase. Checkmate. Morris's facade crumbled as he realized the trap they'd laid. "This way," he muttered, leading them deeper into the East Wing. They passed several rooms with observation windows, small, hospital-like spaces where children sat reading or playing quietly. Each room had monitoring, equipment, and what appeared to be medical testing apparatus. Matthew stopped at one window, his heart dropping. Inside, two boys who matched the Thompsons' photos sat together on a bed, the older one reading to the younger from a tattered book. "Jamie and Tyler Anderson?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Morris didn't respond, but his silence was confirmation enough. "What exactly is being done to these children?" Torres demanded, her professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine outrage. "Nothing harmful," Edward insisted. "They're participating in a study for a rare genetic marker, completely non-invasive procedures." "Then you won't mind showing us the consent forms and study protocols," Jack stated, "as required by federal research regulations." The silence that followed was damning. "I want to speak with them," Matthew said, nodding toward the Anderson boys. "That's not possible," Morris began, but Torres cut him off. "Actually, it is not only possible but required. Open the door, Mr. Morris." Reluctantly, Morris unlocked the room. The boys looked up, wariness evident in their expressions. Matthew knelt to their level. "Hi, Jamie, Tyler. My name is Matthew. Do you remember Robert and Susan Thompson?" The younger boy's face lit up instantly. "Are they here? Are we going back to their house?" "Not today," Matthew said gently. "But they've been looking for you. They never stopped. They said we had other family," the older boy Jamie stated with the directness of a child who had grown used to disappointment. But we don't. They lied. Yes, they did, Matthew agreed. And that was wrong. Ms. Torres, here is going to make sure you're safe now. As Torres spoke with the boys, Matthew turned to Jack. Get the Thompsons here now and contact the families of any other children you can identify. Over the next 2 hours, the full extent of the operation became clear. 5 children, all allegedly orphaned or abandoned, had been selected for their rare genetic profiles and placed in the special program. Beacon Medical Research had been conducting unauthorized trials of experimental gene therapies, with Edward providing both the children and medical oversight to bypass regulatory requirements. The children weren't being harmed physically. The treatments were genuine attempts at medical advancement, but the complete lack of consent, oversight, or transparency constituted serious ethical and legal violations. We were helping them, Edward insisted, as state officials arrived to take control of the facility. These were breakthrough treatments for conditions that would otherwise go untreated. You were using vulnerable children as lab rats, Matthew countered, disgust evident in his voice, and lining your pockets in the process. As the Anderson boys were being prepared for reunion with the Thompsons, Matthew noticed another child, a small girl with auburn hair, no more than 7 years old. She sat alone in one of the rooms, watching the commotion with solemn eyes. "Who's that?" he asked Torres. She checked her clipboard. "Mia Bennett. According to these records, she was brought in 3 months ago, listed as abandoned, no known relatives." Something about the girl's expression, a quiet dignity amid chaos, reminded Matthew of Lily when they'd first met. "May I speak with her?" Torres nodded, unlocking the door. Matthew approached slowly, sitting in a chair near the girl but giving her space. "Hi, Mia. I'm Matthew." She studied him carefully. "Are you a doctor?" "No," he smiled. "Just someone who wants to help." You taking the other kids away?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Yes, they're going to safe places with people who care about them." Mia nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. "What about me?" The question pierced Matthew's heart. "Do you have family? Somewhere, Mia? Anyone who might be looking for you?" She shook her head. "My mom got sick, then some people brought me here. They said it was temporary, but..." She trailed off, the unfinished sentence more poignant than any explanation. "What was your mum's name?" Matthew asked gently. "Rebecca Bennett. She was a teacher." Matthew made a mental note to have Jack investigate immediately. "Well, Mia, for now you'll go somewhere safe while we look for any family you might have." The girl's eyes, wise beyond her years, held his. But what if there isn't anyone? Before Matthew could respond, Torres appeared at the door. "Mr. Hartwell, we need you. There's a situation." In the main hallway, Edward was being escorted out by police officers, his wrists cuffed behind his back. He stopped when he saw Matthew, his face contorted with rage. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're meddling with." Matthew stepped closer. "Actually, I do. I know about Lily. I know what you did 12 years ago." Edward's expression flickered with surprise before hardening again. "You can't prove anything." "The DNA tests already have," Matthew replied evenly. "She's my daughter, Edward, mine and Sophia's. You stole her from us. Sophia was never meant for you." Edward spat, his composure cracking. "She was supposed to be mine. Everything was supposed to be mine. The company, the fortune, all of it." "So you took my child? Out of jealousy?" "I took what should have been mine in the first place," Edward snarled, "and I'd do it again." An officer pulled Edward away, continuing toward the exit. Matthew stood frozen, the confirmation of his suspicions offering no satisfaction, only a deep sadness for the years lost to such petty hatred. Jack approached, placing a hand on Matthew's shoulder. "We've got him, Matthew. Between the financial fraud, unauthorized medical experimentation, and child endangerment, he's facing decades in prison." "And Lily?" Matthew asked quietly. "The custody hearing is still set for Monday, but with this evidence there's no question she'll be placed permanently in your care." Matthew nodded, his thoughts turning to the small girl he'd just met. Jack, there's one more thing. I need you to find everything you can about Rebecca Bennett and her daughter Mia. Jack followed Matthew's gaze to where Mia sat, watching the proceedings with solemn eyes. You're thinking of taking her in too? I'm thinking no child should be alone in the world, Matthew replied. Not if I can help it. As they prepared to leave, Matthew received a call from Diana. Matthew, you need to come home right away, she said, her voice tense. Edward's wife is here. She's demanding to see you, and she's making accusations about Sophia. What kind of accusations? She says Sophia's passing wasn't from natural causes, that Edward was involved somehow. Matthew, she has medical records, things that were kept out of the official investigation. Matthew's blood ran cold. I'm on my way. Don't let her leave. He turned to Jack. We need to go now. This just got even bigger than we thought. As they drove back to Greenwich, Matthew's mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. If Edward's jealousy had driven him to separate the triplets, what else might he have done? What other secrets were waiting to be uncovered? And, most troubling of all, if Sophia's passing hadn't been from natural complications of childbirth as he'd always believed, then what really happened on that December night 12 years ago? When Matthew arrived home, he found Diana in the study, with a thin, elegant woman he recognized as Patricia Hartwell, Edward's wife of 15 years. The girls were nowhere to be seen. Diana had wisely kept them upstairs during this sensitive conversation. Patricia looked up as Matthew entered, her composed facade cracking to reveal exhaustion and fear. Matthew, she said simply. Patricia. He took a seat across from her, noting the thick manila folder clutched in her manicured hands. Diana says you have information about Sophia. Patricia nodded, her gaze dropping to the folder. I should have come forward years ago, but Edward, I was afraid of what he might do. He can't hurt you now, Matthew assured her. He's in custody. She took a deep breath. I found these files in Edward's home office 3 years ago. I confronted him, and he threatened me. Said if I ever told anyone, especially you, I'd regret it. I believed him, so I hid the documents and tried to forget what I'd seen. What changed? Diana asked gently. Last month, I overheard him on the phone discussing some problem with New Horizons. He mentioned children being used in unauthorized trials. That's when I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. Edward's obsession with taking what's yours has gone too far. Patricia slid the folder across the table. These are copies of Sophia's actual medical records from the night she passed, along with notes Edward made afterward. The official records were altered. Matthew opened the folder with trembling hands, his lawyer's training helping him process the technical medical terminology. What he found made his blood run cold. She was given potassium chloride, he said hoarsely. After the cesarean, it wasn't a natural complication. Patricia nodded grimly. Edward had access to the recovery room. The original nurse's notes indicate she left Sophia alone with him for approximately 7 minutes. When she returned, Sophia's condition was deteriorating rapidly. And no one questioned this, Jack asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Edward altered the electronic records before anyone could, Patricia explained. He replaced the original medication log with one showing only approved post-surgical medications. By the time questions might have been raised, the digital trail was gone. Except for these, Matthew said, holding up the papers. How did these survive? Edward is meticulous. He kept the originals as insurance, leverage against the nurse who unknowingly aided him by leaving Sophia alone. Her name is in those files. Matthew scanned the documents, finding the name Linda Carson. She still works at Greenwich Memorial, Patricia confirmed. Edward made sure she was promoted to head surgical nurse 2 months after Sophia's passing. She never knew why. Matthew sat back, the weight of this revelation crushing him. For 12 years he'd believed Sophia had passed from unavoidable complications. The truth was far more sinister. His own cousin had deliberately taken her life, separated one of their children, and watched Matthew grieve without showing an ounce of remorse. But why? He asked, the single word encompassing a universe of pain. Patricia's expression hardened. Because he wanted everything you had. The company, the fortune, Sophia. Especially Sophia. They dated briefly in college. Did you know that? Before she met you, he never got over her choosing you instead. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Edward had always resented Matthew's success, but his bitterness had transformed into something monstrous when Sophia entered the picture. He planned to take the company eventually, Patricia continued. That's why he kept one of the triplets, separate, to create confusion later about inheritance and succession. But Sophia, recognizing him in the recovery room, wasn't part of the plan. According to his notes, she saw him adjusting her IV and realized something was wrong. He couldn't risk her telling anyone. Diana, who had remained silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke. You said you found these 3 years ago. Why come forward now? Patricia looked away. I was a coward. I told myself it was in the past, that nothing could bring Sophia back. But when I realized he was still hurting children through New Horizons, she trailed off, shame evident in her posture. Jack, ever the attorney, focused on practical matters. These documents, combined with your testimony, are enough to launch a formal investigation into Sophia's passing. Edward will face additional charges, serious ones. Matthew barely heard them. His mind was filled with images of Sophia, her smile, her laugh, the way she'd looked forward to meeting their daughters. She'd been taken from them deliberately, cruelly, and one of those daughters had been stolen away, raised without knowing her father or sisters. Patricia, he said finally, I need you to make a formal statement, today. She nodded. I'm prepared to do that. I've already packed my things and made arrangements to stay with my sister in California. I can't remain in that house knowing what I know. After Patricia left with Jack to provide her official statement, Matthew sat alone in his study, trying to process everything. The depth of Edward's betrayal seemed bottomless. Not content with causing Sophia's passing, he had separated the triplets, diverted inheritance funds, and eventually expanded his exploitation to other vulnerable children. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Diana entered, concern evident in her expression. The girls are asking for you, she said gently. They sense something's wrong. Matthew nodded, gathering his composure. No matter how devastating this revelation, his daughters needed him to be strong. Upstairs, he found all 3 girls in the media room, huddled together on the sectional sofa. Despite their identical appearances, each had already established her own space. Emma with a book, Olivia with her sketch pad, and Lily simply watching, still absorbing this new world she'd entered. Dad? Emma's perceptive eyes narrowed. What's happening? Aunt Diana wouldn't tell us anything. Matthew sat down, choosing his words carefully. Some new information has come to light about your mother's passing and about why Lily was separated from us. Was it really Edward? Olivia asked. We overheard you talking yesterday. Matthew sighed, realizing he shouldn't underestimate their awareness. Yes, it was Edward. He did something very wrong, and now he's facing consequences for it. He caused Mom's passing, didn't he? Emma's bluntness was characteristic. She'd always preferred difficult truths to comfortable lies. Matthew looked at each girl in turn, seeing Sophia in their identical features. Yes, he admitted finally. We've discovered evidence that he was responsible. The room fell silent as the girls processed this information. Lily, who had no memories of Sophia but had been denied her presence just as surely as her sisters, was the first to speak. Gran always said my mother was watching over me, she said quietly, that she would have loved me if she'd had the chance. She would have loved you fiercely, Matthew confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. She was so excited to meet you, all of you. She used to talk to you before you were born, tell you stories about all the things you'd do together. Olivia, always the most emotionally expressive, moved to sit beside her father, leaning against his shoulder. Will you tell us about her, the real her, not just the pictures and stories you've shared before? Matthew put his arm around her, making space for the other girls to join them. Your mother was extraordinary, brilliant and kind and stubborn in all the right ways. She fought for what she believed in and never compromised her principles. As he shared stories of Sophia, her passion for environmental causes, her terrible cooking but wonderful baking, her infectious laugh, Matthew watched the girls absorbing this legacy, connecting to the mother they had lost. For Lily, these stories were entirely new. For Emma and Olivia, they added depth to the sanitized version of Sophia they'd grown up with. "She sounds like Emma," Lily observed, "strong-minded." Emma smiled at the comparison. "Dad always says I got her determination. And Olivia has her creativity," Matthew added. "And Lily has her resilience." The moment was interrupted by Matthew's phone. It was Jack. "Patricia's statement is complete," he reported. "The DA is expediting charges against Edward, but there's a complication. Calvin Morris is missing." Matthew stepped out of the room to continue the conversation. Missing since when? He never returned to New Horizons after being questioned yesterday. His house is empty, and his accounts show large withdrawals over the past week. "He's running," Matthew realized. "He knows Edward will implicate him to save himself." "There's more," Jack continued. "I looked into Rebecca Bennett, Mia's mother. She didn't simply fall ill. She was in a car accident 4 months ago. Witnesses reported a black SUV forcing her off the road, but it was never located." Matthew's concern deepened. And after her mother's accident, Mia conveniently ended up at New Horizons. Exactly. Rebecca Bennett was an investigative journalist. According to her editor, she was working on a story about medical research ethics violations just before her accident. The implications were clear. She was investigating Beacon and New Horizons. Most likely. The state has placed Mia in emergency, foster care for now, but given the circumstances, I want to take her, Matthew said decisively, at least temporarily. If Morris is still out there and she's connected to her mother's investigation, she could be in danger. I anticipated you might say that, Jack replied. I've already started the paperwork for emergency placement. I should have approval by morning. After ending the call, Matthew returned to the girls, who had moved on to watching a movie together. The scene of domestic tranquility contrasted sharply with the darkness they'd been discussing, but children possessed a remarkable ability to compartmentalize, to process grief in bursts, surrounded by moments of normalcy. He sat with them until they fell asleep, all three curled together on the sectional like they'd been sharing space their entire lives. Looking at them, Matthew felt a renewed determination. He couldn't change the past, couldn't restore what Edward had taken from them, but he could ensure their future was secure. The next morning brought news that Calvin Morris had been spotted trying to cross into Canada. Border agents had detained him based on the alert Jack had arranged, and he was being transported back to Connecticut for questioning. He's talking, Jack reported when he called. Trying to make a deal. He's confirmed everything, Edward's involvement in separating the triplets, the financial fraud at New Horizons, the unauthorized medical trials, and he's implicated Victor Reese from Beacon Medical. What about Rebecca Bennett's accident? Jack's pause was telling. Morris claims Edward arranged it, said he hired someone to run her off the road when they discovered she was investigating them. Morris insists he didn't know the plan included harming her, just frightening her off the story. Matthew's jaw tightened. And Mia? According to Morris, taking her to New Horizons was Edward's idea, partly to monitor her in case she knew something about her mother's investigation, and partly because she happened to have the genetic marker Beacon was studying. When can she come here? The judge has approved emergency placement. She could be here this afternoon. True to Jack's word, a social worker arrived that afternoon with Mia. The small girl clutched a worn backpack and regarded the Hartwell mansion with wide eyes. Hello again, Mia, Matthew greeted her gently. Welcome to our home. The twins and Lily appeared in the doorway, curious about the new arrival. These are my daughters, Emma, Olivia, and Lily, Matthew introduced them. Girls, this is Mia. She'll be staying with us for a while. Emma, always direct, asked the question clearly on all their minds. Is she our sister too? Matthew smiled at the assumption. No, but she needs a safe place right now, and we have plenty of room. Olivia stepped forward with the natural empathy that characterized her. "Do you like art, Mia? I could show you my studio upstairs." Mia nodded shyly, and Olivia gently took her hand, leading her into the house with the twins following. Matthew watched them go, grateful for his daughter's open hearts. Diana, who had arrived to help with the transition, stood beside him. "You've started collecting children," she observed, though her tone held no judgment. "I've started protecting them," Matthew corrected, "something I should have been able to do for Lily 12 years ago." As they followed the children inside, Matthew's phone chimed with a text from Jack. Morris gave up everything, Edward facing additional charges for Rebecca Bennett's accident, both being held without bail. "Call me when you can." Matthew pocketed the phone, choosing to focus on the children rather than the continuing investigation. Justice was unfolding as it should, but these young lives, damaged by Edward's actions but resilient nonetheless, needed attention now. In the kitchen, he found all 4 girls already settled around the island counter, Lily showing Mia how to make the famous snickerdoodle cookies she'd learned from her grandmother. The scene was so natural, so right, that Matthew felt a momentary peace despite the storm of revelations still swirling around them. That peace was shattered by the sudden blaring of security alarms throughout the house. Mrs. Lawson rushed into the kitchen, her normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. "Mr. Hartwell, the security system detected a perimeter breach on the east side of the property. The guards are investigating, but they've advised we move to the safe room immediately." Matthew's protective instinct surged. "Girls, follow Mrs. Lawson. Now." "Dad, what's happening?" Emma demanded, but Matthew was already moving them toward the reinforced room he'd installed years ago as a precaution. "Just a security precaution," he assured them, trying to keep his tone calm. "Everything's fine." But as they hurried down the hallway, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling that this was no false alarm. Someone had breached his property, someone who likely knew about the revelations of the past few days, someone with nothing left to lose. As Mrs. Lawson ushered the girls into the safe room, Matthew's phone rang. The security chief's voice confirmed his fears. "Mr. Hartwell, we've identified the intruder. It's Victor Reese from Beacon Medical, and sir, he's armed." "Stay with the girls," Matthew instructed Mrs. Lawson as he stepped back from the safe room door. "Lock it behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me or the security team." "Matthew, this is insane," Diana protested. "Let security handle it." "They are," he replied calmly. "But this is my home, and those are my children. I'm not hiding while someone threatens them." Before Diana could argue further, Matthew slipped out, hearing the heavy bolts slide into place behind him. The safe room was virtually impenetrable. Reinforced steel walls, independent ventilation, communication systems, and enough supplies to last days if necessary. The girls would be protected. Matthew moved quietly through the house, staying in contact with his security chief through his earpiece. "Where is he?" Matthew whispered. "West Wing, moving toward the main staircase," came the response. "2 of my men are tracking him from a distance. Police are 3 minutes out." "Keep your distance," Matthew instructed. "He's desperate and dangerous." Matthew positioned himself at the junction of 2 hallways, where he could observe without being seen. Minutes later, Victor Reese appeared, moving with the determination of a man with nothing to lose. In one hand he held a pistol, in the other, a tablet device. "Hartwell," Reese called out, his voice echoing through the mansion. "I know you're here. We need to talk." Matthew remained silent, observing. Reese was sweating profusely, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. The man was clearly unraveling. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Reese continued, swinging the gun erratically. "Our research was helping children no one else could help. Do you have any idea what you've destroyed?" Matthew stepped partially into view, staying behind the cover of a doorway. "Put the gun down, Victor. Whatever you're hoping to accomplish, this isn't the way." Reese spun toward his voice. "You don't understand. Beacon Medical was on the verge of a breakthrough treatment for Canefield syndrome. Those children at New Horizons, they were responding to the therapy. Now the trials have been shut down and years of research is wasted. Research conducted on children without consent," Matthew countered. "Children who were manipulated and isolated for your benefit." "For their benefit," Reese insisted. These were orphans, unwanted children with a fatal genetic condition. We were saving them. Then why the secrecy? Why not go through proper channels, get real consent, conduct your research ethically? Reese's expression darkened. Time and money. Getting FDA approval for human trials would have taken years we didn't have. And the funding? He trailed off, the gun wavering in his hand. Matthew connected the dots. The money Edward diverted from my family trust. That's what funded your research. Among other sources, Reese admitted. Edward provided both funding and subjects. It was an efficient arrangement. An illegal one, Matthew corrected. And now you're adding breaking and entering and armed threats to the charges. Reese laughed bitterly. Charges? I'm finished, Hartwell. My reputation, my career, my freedom, all gone. But I'm not here for revenge. Then why are you here? Reese held up the tablet. Because of this. It's all the research data, everything we learned, all the treatment protocols. It could still save lives if it reaches the right people. He placed the tablet on a nearby table, his movements deliberate. I'm not a monster, despite what you think. I crossed ethical lines, yes, but the science is sound. Matthew studied the man carefully, noting how Reese's hand had steadied on the gun. This wasn't a man overcome by rage. This was calculated. The police are almost here, Victor. Put down the gun and surrender peacefully. I can't go to prison, Reese replied quietly. But I needed to make sure the research survived. Those children deserve that much. The distant wail of police sirens grew louder. Reese tensed, then made a sudden movement toward the mansion's rear exit. Security personnel emerged from concealed positions surrounding him. Drop the weapon, the chief commanded. Reese froze, then slowly placed the gun on the floor, raising his hands. It was never supposed to be about the money, he said, looking directly at Matthew. It started with good intentions. As security restrained him, Matthew approached cautiously. Good intentions don't justify what you did to those children, or to my family. Your family. Reese looked genuinely confused. I had nothing to do with your wife or the triplets. That was all Edward's obsession. Yet you partnered with him, knowing what kind of man he was. Reese's shoulders slumped in defeat. I needed his access and resources. I told myself the end. Justified the means. Police officers entered, taking custody of Reese from Matthew's security team. As they led him away, Matthew retrieved the tablet, wondering what truths it might contain and whether any good could be salvaged from such tainted research. Once the police had cleared the property, Matthew returned to the safe room, giving the all-clear signal. The heavy door opened to reveal 4 anxious girls and an equally concerned Diana and Mrs. Lawson. "Dad!" the twins cried in unison, rushing to embrace him. Lily hung back slightly, still adjusting to expressing such open affection, while Mia observed with the wary caution of a child who had learned not to hope too quickly. Everything's fine now, Matthew assured them all. The police have taken Dr. Reese away. We're safe. That evening, after the excitement had subsided and the younger girls were in bed, Matthew sat in his study with Diana, Jack, and Emma, who had insisted on being included in the grown-up talk. Reese claims the research was legitimate, Matthew explained, having reviewed the tablet's contents. And from what I can tell, it does appear to be genuine work on treating Canefield syndrome. That doesn't excuse using children as unwitting test subjects, Diana pointed out. No, it doesn't, Matthew agreed, but the data itself could help develop proper treatments through legitimate channels. I've sent copies to 2 independent research ethics committees for review. Jack turned to practical matters. With Reese's capture, we've now accounted for all the major players. Edward and Morris remain in custody, both facing multiple serious charges. Patricia's testimony about Sophia's passing has launched a separate investigation, and most importantly, your temporary custody of Lily has been made permanent by the court. What about Mia? Emma asked, her voice surprisingly mature for a 12-year-old. Matthew exchanged glances with Diana before answering. Mia's situation is different. We're still looking for any family she might have, but in the meantime, she'll stay with us as a foster placement. Emma nodded thoughtfully. She should stay permanently. She fits here. The simple observation carried profound weight coming from his daughter. In just days, Emma had gone from being one of two to one of three, and now she was advocating for, say, a fourth child in their home. "We'll see," Matthew replied carefully. "What matters most is what's best for Mia." After Emma had gone to bed, Matthew turned to his sister. "She's right, you know. Mia does fit here somehow." Diana smiled. "Your house seems to be expanding to accommodate exactly who needs to be here. First Lily, now Mia. I wonder who's next?" "No one, if I can help it," Matthew chuckled, though without conviction. "4 girls is plenty," says the man who just established a foundation for vulnerable children, Jack commented dryly. Matthew couldn't deny it. Earlier that day, in between crisis management, he had signed the paperwork to create the Margaret Reynolds Foundation for Child Welfare, named in honor of the woman who had raised Lily with love, despite the circumstances. "Speaking of the foundation," Jack continued, "the board of New Horizons has approached me about a potential acquisition. With proper management and oversight, the facility could become a legitimate haven for children in need." "Are you considering it?" Diana asked. Matthew nodded. "It seems fitting, somehow. Taking something Edward corrupted and transforming it into what it should have been all along." The next morning brought news that Edward had confessed to causing Sophia's passing in exchange for a reduction in charges. The full story, his obsession with Sophia, his resentment of Matthew, the elaborate plot to separate the triplets and divert inheritance funds, would soon become public record. Matthew gathered the girls in the family room to explain as gently as possible. They deserved to know the truth, even if it was painful. "So Edward was jealous of you and Mom?" Olivia clarified after Matthew had explained. "Yes. He had feelings for your mother long ago, and he never accepted that she chose me instead." "And that's why he separated me from you?" Lily asked, her voice small but steady. Matthew nodded. "He wanted to hurt us all, but he failed because we found each other anyway." "And now he'll go to prison for a long time," Emma stated with satisfaction. "Yes, he will," Matthew confirmed, along with the others who helped him. Mia, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "What about my mom? Did Edward hurt her too?" Matthew knelt before her, choosing his words carefully. "The police believe Edward was responsible for your mother's accident. She was investigating his partnership with Dr. Reese, getting too close to uncovering what they were doing at New Horizons." Tears filled Mia's eyes. "I knew something was wrong. She told me she was working on an important story, that she was going to help children who were being used." Matthew gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Your mother was very brave. She was trying to do the right thing, just like you've been brave through all of this." "What happens to me now?" Mia asked, the question echoing. Her earlier uncertainty at New Horizons. Before Matthew could answer, Lily moved to sit beside Mia, taking her hand. "You stay with us," she said with the conviction of someone who had recently found her own belonging. "Right, Dad?" Matthew looked at the 4 girls, his biological daughters and the child brought to them through another of Edward's crimes. The answer was obvious. "Yes," he confirmed. "If that's what Mia wants and if the court approves, she stays with us." Mia's cautious smile was answer enough. In the weeks that followed, life at the Hartwell estate settled into a new rhythm. Lily enrolled in school with Emma and Olivia, quickly catching up academically with tutoring help. Mia, still processing her mother's passing, began working with a grief counselor Diana had recommended, showing small but significant improvements each day. The Margaret Reynolds Foundation took shape, with Matthew appointing experienced child welfare experts to the board and establishing its mission: to protect vulnerable children and reform a system that had failed too many. The acquisition of New Horizons was finalized, and plans were underway to transform it into a model care facility with transparent operations and ethical practices. Edward and his co-conspirators faced justice in court, with Edward ultimately receiving multiple consecutive sentences that ensured he would never again be free to harm another child. The revelation of Sophia's true cause of passing brought a wave of media attention, but Matthew focused on shielding the girls from the worst of it while helping them understand their mother's legacy. One evening, 6 months after Lily had first entered their lives at that chance gas station encounter, Matthew sat on the back terrace watching the girls play in the garden. The sight of them together, different yet harmonious, each finding her place in their reconstructed family, filled him with profound gratitude. Diana joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about how quickly everything changed," he replied. 6 months ago, I thought our family was complete. I had no idea what was missing." "And now?" Matthew smiled as he watched Lily teaching Mia how to cartwheel, with the twins offering enthusiastic commentary. "Now I can't imagine our family any other way." "You've given them all something precious," Diana observed. "Not just a home, but belonging." "They've given me just as much," Matthew countered. "After Sophia, I was going through the motions, in many ways, building the business, raising the twins, but something was always missing. Now I feel whole again." The Foundation's work was expanding beyond new horizons. Using the evidence gathered from Edward's operation, they had identified other facilities with questionable practices and were working with authorities to investigate. The legitimate research from Beacon Medical had been transferred to ethical research institutions where treatments for Canefield syndrome were progressing through proper channels. Most importantly, the Anderson siblings and the other children from New Horizons had been placed with caring families, including the Thompsons, who had finally welcomed Jamie and Tyler into their home permanently. As twilight descended, Matthew called the girls in for dinner. They raced toward the house, breathless and laughing, no longer 4 separate individuals, but a unified sisterhood forged through extraordinary circumstances. At the dinner table, Lily raised her glass of sparkling cider. "I want to make a toast," she announced, "to finding each other." "To finding each other," they all echoed, the simple phrase encompassing their remarkable journey. Later that night, after the younger girls had gone to bed, Matthew found Emma in the study looking through old photo albums. "What are you searching for?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Pictures of Mom," she replied, "for Lily and Mia. They never got to see her, not really." Matthew's heart swelled with pride at his daughter's thoughtfulness. "That's a wonderful idea." Emma turned the pages slowly, pointing to a photo of Sophia standing on a beach, her hair blowing in the wind. "You know what's weird, Dad? I used to look at these pictures and feel sad that I couldn't remember her. But now, with Lily here, I feel like parts of Mum came back to us." "That's exactly right," Matthew agreed. "You 3 girls are her legacy. Her spirit lives in each of you, in different ways. And Mia." Matthew smiled at his perceptive daughter. "Mia is part of the new chapter we're writing together." Emma nodded, satisfied with the answer. "I'm glad we found Lily at that gas station, even though everything afterward was hard and scary sometimes." "Me too," Matthew said softly. "It brought our family full circle." As Emma returned to the photo album, Matthew reflected on how profoundly their lives had changed since that chance encounter. What began as a routine stop had unraveled a web of deception spanning 12 years, exposing crimes that had torn apart not just his family, but others as well. Yet from that darkness had emerged healing and restoration. Lily had found her true family. The twins had discovered a sister they never knew existed. Mia had found safety and belonging after losing everything. And Matthew himself had found closure for questions that had haunted him since Sophia's passing, along with a renewed purpose that honored her memory. The journey wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead as the girls grew, as the Foundation expanded its work, as they all continued to process the traumas of the past. But Matthew knew with absolute certainty that they would face whatever came next together, as a family made stronger by the very forces that had once threatened to destroy it. Outside, the first stars appeared in the evening sky. Matthew remembered something Sophia used to say when they would stargaze together: "The darkness makes the stars shine brighter." In the face of unimaginable betrayal and loss, his family had not only survived, but emerged more radiant than before. 4 bright